Everybody, Steve here from The Varied Life. And what we're doing today, there's some great information in regards to fitness. And as you can see from the title, rep range for hypertrophy is 5 to 30 reps. What the hell? Training to failure? What about Dorian Yates, Mike Menser, that supposedly do one set per body part is more superior for strength and hypertrophy gains? Well, unfortunately, there are 222 studies that prove that's not the case. And it's not all about intensity. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And this is courtesy of Menno Henselmans, who is a researcher. The guy is wicked smart when it comes to sports science, hypertrophy, nutrition, strength, power, all of this stuff. He has participated in a number of studies that have been published. He's worked with Schoenfeld, which is probably one of the world's top researchers when it comes to sports science, hypertrophy, strength, and all of those things. So we're going to talk about that today. When you talk about, what is the best rep range for strength and what is the number of sets, you will get the usual 3 to 5 sets, with 6 to 12 repetitions, and that's what I've been doing for quite a long time, and I've got some really good results. I'm 6'2", I'm 250 pounds, I got 17.75-inch arms. The biggest I had was 18-inch arms and over a couple of notches on the tape measure, which was really cool. 50-plus inch chest and visible abs, pretty damn good for being 57 years old. And I also accredit a lot of the gains that I made in regards to strength and hypertrophy was due to the fact that, and let me show you a picture, was due to the fact that when I did my recomp without any PEDs or anything like that, I used the techniques and the things that have been found in these studies and meta-analysis. So let me see if I can find that. Here we are. And I'll show you a picture of my, where is it? My recomp. Boom. So there is my recomp. And what I ended up doing, we want to move that to about right there. So during my recomp, I started out at 210 pounds, as you can see there in the picture. And I was skinny, fat. In other words, I had kind of a pot belly. It was going over my belt. And I kind of had a little skinny man boob action going, no shoulders, no arms. My legs were kind of skinny, and I had a jiggly butt. So what I ended up doing in my natural recomp was I took all this information that I found in these studies and I incorporated that into my routine. So I did multiple sets. I did rep ranges between 6 and 12, of course, doing a lot of intensity because intensity is important. But there's other variables as well, such as nutrition, recovery, and all of that, which all needs to be tweaked for the individual. Protein intake, carb intake, if you're eating too much and you're getting too much fat, you need to cut down on the number of carbs and maybe the number of fats. Again, it's a balancing game, but to get on the board, I used what I found in these studies. So with that, it took 3 years, just over 3 years, and I bulked up to 263 pounds, which was pretty good. I didn't have visible abs when I got up to 263, and I was tired of eating. What I ended up doing was just getting to a point of eating that many calories a day was just absolutely insane. Let me kind of lighten this up a little bit so you can see. And, when you're talking about eating 4,000 or 5,000 calories a day, 6,000 calories a day was the most that I had eaten. I was eating 6-7 times a day, and I was constantly full. I was constantly bloated, eating a buttload of protein. I also used protein powders and shakes to help with that because, eating every 2 hours, I can't eat a meal when I was at work, so I'd have a protein shake. So I got up to 263, and then what I ended up doing is cutting, and I dropped down to 245. Well, actually, it was 243, and you can see I had some visible abs, and life was good. I did an awesome job at that, and I learned a ton. So with that being said, a lot of people have asked me, what did you do? And so I would tell people, hey, here's how I did my workouts, 3 to 5 times a week, doing about an hour. It started out 3 times a week with about an hour per workout session. I did a variation of push-pull-leg. I did a variation of bro splits. I did bro splits. I also ended up doing a variation where I changed, and I even worked out twice a day for 5 days a week. So I would do some heavy movements, heavy lifting in the morning, and then when I got home at the end of the day, I would do like lighter workouts on that same muscle group, and then I'd have a day of rest, and that was really hard. I probably should have had more rest time. But again, I ended up with some great gains, all gleaned from these studies. There's numerous published studies, and that is what really helped me get to a place to understand there's no such thing as spot fat reduction. There's no such thing as doing 1 set per body part 2 times a week for only 20-30 minutes and you'll get superior hypertrophy and strength gains. That's just not how it works. And the studies show without a shadow of a doubt that multiple sets are better. And of course, intensity comes into play. Of course, recovery comes into play. Nutrition. You have to have good nutrition to fuel your workouts and the protein to build muscle during that MPS process. But then you also have to have enough fuel in your system to fuel the recovery from that workout. So again, a lot of different variables. And then there's the individual variables of, how much testosterone are you producing? And it's interesting because I ran across an individual saying, I got high testosterone, but I don't understand why I can't build muscle. Well, your testosterone, your total testosterone can be high, but your free testosterone is usually 1% to 2% of that total, and that 1 or 2% is responsible generally, along with some other variables, receptors, HGH production, and so on and so forth, that will contribute to building muscle, repairing and building muscle. And there are individuals that will have high total testosterone, but their free testosterone is bad. So that's why they have problem building muscle. And it could be a variety of things. It could be some low T symptoms. It could be some other hormone issues, your thyroid, nutritional things that come into play, deficiencies, genes that come in the body, your genetics. I've been blessed with some good genetics. So, there's a lot more involved than just screaming at the top of your lungs. All you need is 1 set and intensity. The studies have unequivocally shown that is not the case. So we're going to take a look at some very important information because the rep range that I use to get to where I'm at today, and currently I'm 250 pounds and my arms are 17.75 inches average, 50-inch chest plus a little, visible abs. I'm pretty good for 57. Now, with that being said, after my natural recomp, there was a number of years, and then I was tired, I was fatigued all the time. So here is my not natty disclaimer. So for 53 plus years, actually 54 years or so, I was all natty. And then it got to the point of where it's like I'm tired, fatigued. I sit on the couch after work, and I'll be, 5 seconds later, I'm snoozing. A lot of other problems. Long story short, I'm on TRT, and it's a normal dose. I'm doing about 100 per week, 120 per week, which is good. There's a majority of people that are out there that require a lot more. My doctor says that I'm a good responder, so yeah, things are doing good, and I'm taking advantage of that. I'm looking for long-term health and longevity. So with that, I'm going to take advantage of the TRT that I'm on, and it has helped to some degree. But the majority of what helped me during my all-natural recomp was the things that I learned in these studies and these meta-analysis. So we're going to take a look, and we're going to dive into this. And it's not me that did this, but it's actually a guy named Menno Henselmans, who is the man. He has done wonders, and he has done work with Brian Schoenfeld. He's worked with some other people that are great scientists in the world of testing and evaluating and published studies worldwide. So we're going to take a look at that. Let's continue on. Bam. And this is it. Menno Henselmans, this guy is great for the fact that he deals with the facts. So when he references studies and meta-analysis, when it comes to strength or hypertrophy or power or whatever it is, muscle protein synthesis, he deals with measurable data. And the conclusions that come from that data show beyond a shadow of a doubt, this is kind of the area that you need to focus on when it comes to the topic that he's discussing. And it's all backed up by studies. So in this case, what's most important for muscle growth and strength. Now, he has a video on this where it's over 200 studies. And actually, if you do the math, it ends up it's 222 studies. There's a number of studies, meta-analysis that include even more studies. It comes up to over 200. So this is really amazing. And he's got the transcript here where he talks about, what is most important. And what we see from the Dorian Yates, Mike Menser, 1 set per body part. You only need to work out 20, 30 minutes twice a week, and you will get the best hypertrophy and strength gains. You don't need to do more sets because it's all about intensity. These studies show that's not the case at all. And that is usually the mantra. Well, if you're not getting results, you're not training intense enough. That's not it either. And I highly recommend, I'll put this in the description box for this, and you can watch the video, you can read the transcript, go over it, and it will shine the truth. The truth will set you free. And there's going to be a lot of pissed off people. So he's going to discuss 2 meta-analyses that were very, very large from 2023. So it is a very new study. Again, with new studies and new results, sometimes we step and we correct things that were misinformation or things that we thought were true in the past. They analyzed 178 studies and concluded, and they went in. There was another big one, an ultra big picture umbrella of 44 systematic reviews. That's another 44 reviews, each which contained many other studies. So well over 200 if you look at the meta-analysis. Well, he goes in here and he talks about training volume, and you've probably seen the images where the label for strength is 1 to 5 reps range with multiple sets, and a label of hypertrophy is 6 to 12 rep range, which I have been preaching for ever and a day. If you want to do power and strength, that 1 to 5 rep range. Hypertrophy, 6 to 12 rep range. And then endurance is 13 plus. Rep range. So if you get into 13 to 20 to 30 reps, you're looking into endurance of that muscle. In reality, the hypertrophy zone is not 6 to 12 reps. It's actually 1 to 30 reps. So how can this be? This, when you go over 30 reps or 30% of 1 rep max, it seems the resistance is too light to stimulate maximum tension on muscle fibers and thereby muscle growth and strength development. You'll be able to stimulate some gains, but not maximal gains. When you get super heavy, then you get into the 1 to the 5 rep range. And again, it's a lot of intensity, and that's all you can do. It is true that on a set-by-set basis, you may have less muscle hypertrophy, say with 2 sets than sets of 6. Again, all that has been proven by numerous studies, what I've talked about in the past. And that's not because it's inherently worse, because if you think logically, heavy weights impose higher tension on the muscle fibers. So per rep, this should be better, and indeed they probably are. But if you're doing a few reps, the time under tension is not sufficient to stimulate maximal muscle growth. So with lower reps, you're not going to recruit all of those muscle fibers. So he goes through here and he talks about so you can do 18 sets, you can do 28 sets, you can do sets of 8. All of these sets on a set-by-set basis, so 3 sets of each in many studies show now result in the same amount of muscle growth. It's called the hypertrophy zone myth. And the reason that light weights can be as effective as heavy weights for muscle hypertrophy is because you train with light weights, then you accumulate neuromuscular fatigue. This lowers the recruitment threshold of higher threshold motor units. So, this is a thing. This right here is a killer for the people that say 1 set per body part and it'll give you all, you just need to be super intense. This here is what kills that. And there's more that kills it from all of these studies. So basically what he's talking about here is that when you use lighter weight and you do the higher repetitions, you're putting more fatigue, and you get that neuromuscular fatigue. And this lowers the recruitment threshold of higher threshold units. So in other words, you fatigue the smaller units, and then the bigger units are going to come into play. It's kind of a thing, and it's scientifically proven. So imagine that. He goes on, and there is some great information here. So he comes down here, and it ends up, so that's why intensity as in your relative load, how many reps you do, does not influence muscle growth within the hypertrophy zone. The hypertrophy zone 2.0, if you will, of say 5 to 30 repetitions. So he talks about talking about the type of muscle fibers and what happens and so on and so forth. But it's concluded that, yeah, it's the new rep range for hypertrophy is 5 to 30 reps, which if we think back to, the bodybuilding days, whether it was natural bodybuilders or professional bodybuilders that were augmented with, testosterone and major gear juicing stuff like D-ball trend and so on and so forth, stuff I will never touch. Too many people died from that. The studies show that this hypertrophy zone is 5 to 30 repetitions. So the good news is, when I used to say do 6 to 12 repetitions, do 6 repetitions, then do 8, 10, and 12 for doing 4 sets per body part, that is a good place to start. And it's definitely gets you on the board in regards to hypertrophy. I got a lot of hypertrophy and muscle growth with that. So have so many other people. We see bodybuilders, we see, fitness experts and so on and so forth. That is what has been shown. But could we get more by doing more repetitions? And that is the kicker here. So we're not limited to just, 12 repetitions or 16 repetitions and then call it quits. What we're seeing is that when we get into the higher rep range, even when using lighter weights, that can still result in more hypertrophy, which is just amazing. Now, the people that will get mad at this are the one-set wonder crap fluencers, the fitness influencers that will say you only need to do 1 set per body part, 100% intensity, and that will produce more hypertrophy and strength than doing multiple sets. And it has to be heavy weight. That they're all about the heavy weight and all about intensity. Those are the two things that I have seen a lot of people that argue with me, which really you're not arguing with me, you're arguing against the studies. So don't, you call me names and all you want, that's fine. I don't really care. You don't pay my bills, and I'm old enough that I don't care what you say. But your argument is with the researchers, the people with the PhD, the tens of thousands of people represented in these studies and more that have been DEXA scanned, that have been MRI'd and muscle biopsied and x-rays and the whole 9 yards to show without a doubt that hypertrophy can happen. Outside of that is much better than 1 set per body part. For example, for strength gains. In the previous video that I ended up doing, talked about how one study showed that there was a 40% increase of strength gains when you do 2 or 3 sets compared to 1 set. And then there was another study that concluded that it was 46% in the study that they did. So we're seeing around 40 to 46, 48% more strength gains with multiple sets of 2 or 3 than with 1 single set. People will say, oh, the intensity is what matters. They're just not training intense enough, as if that's their answer to everything. But unfortunately, the science shows that's not the case. So Menno goes through, and strength is influenced by volume, not nearly as much for muscle growth. There's a correlation between strength and muscle growth is basically linear. And then he goes on and he talks about more stuff. Let me see if I can find it here. Drugs, of course, are a huge factor. Oh, here's where he talks about training to failure does help on average. If we look at the granular data, does improve muscle growth and strength development, especially muscle growth. But it's a very small effect that's explained by the increased volume that you do if you do more repetitions. It's not nearly as important as doing more sets in circumstances. So for more details, you can check out that video. And regarding Menser and Dorian Yates and looking at these single individuals for one, it makes no sense to look at single individuals. If you look at the recent short he did on what makes the most difference, you can see it's mostly genetics, training hard, and they both had that in check. And there's also the elephant that is sitting in the middle of the room, massive amounts of steroid abuse by Dorian Yates and Mike Menser. And Mike Menser openly admitted that he did barbiturates to fuel his workouts. And Dorian Yates and Mike Menser didn't even come up with their one set per body part, which really wasn't even one set. It was 1 to 2 warm-up sets of 70% of one rep max, and then they did 100% one working set. So where the shit influencers that we have today in the fitness world that say, oh, you only need to do one set per body part, it proves they can't even follow what Mike Menser and Dorian Yates did. All right, I'm getting hot, and so I need to cool off. So with that being said, trying to say that one set per body part, and then pointing to Dorian Yates and Mike Menser and saying, see, that just proves that I'm not doing steroids. And the average everyday person that wants to get in shape for health and longevity, they're not going to do steroids either. And by the way, the majority of the muscle that Yates and Menser, how they got that muscle was through traditional training with multiple sets and even high repetitions and high volume. It wasn't until Mike Menser, it was like 10 or 12 years later that he started. So he already had the majority of his muscle, and he had already been on steroids for a super long time, about a decade. So really trying to bring Dorian and Menser into this picture and bring it to the masses of everyday people who are not top bodybuilders, who are not spending, $3,000, $5,000, and $10,000 a month on steroids. Let's compare apples to apples instead of apples and oranges or apples and rocks. It's just totally dissimilar. And then he goes, and then drugs also was a huge factor. Yes, so he did mention that. So he continues on and he talks about, when I talk about training to failure, for example, saying it does matter to some extent because it increases the volume. Now, this is another thing that a lot of people don't understand is the volume. There's studies that show that higher volumes do result in greater strength and hypertrophy gains. The volume means repetitions or total amount of work, which is weights multiplied by repetitions multiplied by the number of sets is your total volume, which researchers use. So you need to have some clear definitions. So in the context of that, for example, with rest intervals, exercise order training to failure. However, in other settings, total set number is most important as I discussed, when it comes to sets of different number of repetitions, we see that they stimulate similar amounts of muscle hypertrophy. Now, that's actually a very simple solution that explains why in some contexts, set volume and in other contexts, repetition volume is more important if the weight is kept constant. The total amount of tension imposed on that muscle is constant. In that setting, the total amount of repetitions becomes important. So again, we need to look at volume and we need to look at the definitions of what we're talking about and take that all into consideration. So where's the other good stuff? So the trade-off is largely neutral. When it comes to higher versus lower repetitions, you get in the range of 5 to 30 repetitions roughly. However, what the weight is kept constant, like with training to failure, we do see these effects. And then he goes on and he talks about, so to conclude, if training intensity is the most important thing for strength development and training volume is the most important thing for muscular growth, what training volume and what training intensity should be using? Well, he answers that question. For strength development, it basically seems to be the case that the heavier you go, the bigger your strength gains in trained individuals. Most studies in untrained individuals do not find very appreciable differences in strength development. So in other words, it doesn't really matter. You're going through and putting resistance on your muscles. They're responding with hypertrophy and some strength gains. But really, it's not until you are in the game for quite some time that you're going to, really get some strength gains. So typically in untrained individuals or novices in general, I would say don't bother going with 1 rep max attempts and the like. It's just needless injury. It's not a good way to practice good technique. It's much easier and more comfortable to get them used to high repetitions first, then start lifting heavier, which is exactly the information that I gained from the studies. And in regards to injuries that happen in the gym with men and women, trained or untrained people, is that concentrate on things that will keep you safe. And that's why numerous personal fitness trainers and organizations that certify these individuals all glean the same information from these studies and say, hey, once you go over 70% of your 1 rep max, from 70 to 100%, we see a greater increase of injuries. So let's back off, because we want our clients to keep paying us, and we want them to be safe. We don't want them to get injured. So 70, 60, 70, maybe even 80% is kind of the range of what we're seeing for most certified fitness trainers that they recommend to their clients. And then he goes on to say, as they progress and you get better muscular control, your technique improves, you learn some other tips and strategies, tempo, all of that, then you start benefiting more from the higher training intensities. And again, this is absolutely proven when you look at Dorian Yates and you look at Mike Mentzer and what they did. They, aside from the massive steroid abuse, they did multiple sets and multiple reps for about a decade before they came up with their system. If you want to maximize strength, then for exercise, you want to maximize strength development, you'll need to use heavy weights. If you want to maximize strength development, there's no substitute for 1 rep max attempts. But again, understand that as a new lifter, you want to cross the T's and dot the I's, and you want to have a good muscular base before you go into that. I can't tell you the number of times that I've talked to people that have gone to the gym that have told, older people that are like, hey, I got into this, I want to do strength training. And next thing you know, muscle strains, pulled this, pulled that. In severe cases, they tear their shoulder and rotator cuffs. There's an individual that had a pec tear because he went too hard, too fast, too heavy, too early. And that's not really a good thing. So anyway, he talks about a 1 to 5 rep range. There's a trade-off. Now, this comes with a trade-off of having to do multiple sets and having to do very long workouts. So when you're doing strength, and even more so when you're doing powerlifting workouts, you're still going to do multiple sets per body part, but you're going to have a longer rest period between those activities so that your CNS can recover. You can kind of get your breath back, and you can do those follow-up sets and again regain some intensity to put in those sets that you're going to do. If you still want your optimum volume in muscle growth, it might be problematic, and he talks about that if you're going for strength and you want to do muscle growth, heavy usually tends to be harder on your joints. And so when you go up into those higher ranges of intensity of 100% of your 1 rep max, that is going to have more of an impact, an adverse impact on your joints, tendons, and so on and so forth, and even more so for older people, especially older people that haven't worked out before, or it's been decades since they've worked out, since they're in their 20s or 30s, and now they're in their 50s, 60s, and 70s. Yeah, that is very concerning, and it's probably not a good idea, which is why they recommend lighter weights, more repetitions, so that you have control over the weights and you can incrementally go up with minimal amounts of injuries. Suffice to say, for maximum strength, 1 to 5 rep range. For muscle hypertrophy, it's important to maximize total number of sets that you can do without burning out, without getting injured. And again, part of that burnout, you can do super intense set, but you're going to have to increase the rest period between your sets. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. As a matter of fact, there are studies that have shown that once you get into those higher intensities, 2 to 5 minutes, even 10 minutes is beneficial, and you can get more gains with multiple sets than you can with one set. Let's see. So there are actually studies that find that higher volumes result in worse muscle growth and strength development, and we deem that's typically overreaching and overtraining, and that's given in part by large recovery capacity. I can attest to this. I have overworked and overtrained, and I have plateaued in regards to hypertrophy and strength, and it's because I wasn't allowing myself to recover. And instead of just doing a 1-day rest period, I should have done 2 days. I would have gotten, and which I found out later on, when I did increase my recovery time, I was able to go past those plateaus that I had normally seen in the past when it comes to strength gains. He's going to discuss that, the effect of cutting and bulking, all this. The best meta-analysis is actually, I think, is not one of the two new ones, but one from 2022 by Bayesian et al. They found the optimal volume in general on average is between 10 and 30 sets per muscle group per week. Now, I've talked about this study in the past, and yeah, it's a thing. Volume comes into play, and the number of sets that you do per muscle group does come into play if you're looking for hypertrophy. And again, it's shown here. That's a big range, and that's because of the big variance between individuals, again, genetics, some nutrition, recovery, and so on and so forth. But that rep range of 10 to 30 sets. And here's an interesting thing that we see here in this part right here. If you were to type the trains Yates versus Menser style, then you would be going closer to that, to the 10 sets rather than the 30 sets per muscle group per week. Probably, again, depending on your recovery capacity and in principle, how well trained you are and how long you've trained, with many other factors that he talks about, nutrition, recovery, tempo that you use when doing the repetition and so on. But as a rule of thumb, you're closer to 10 by doing that 1 set per body part. Again, there's an individual he's selling a routine to seniors saying that you only need to do 2 workouts per week, and it's only 20 to 30 minutes for each workout, and that's going to give you a lot of strength and hypertrophy, and it's better for you, but you're operating at that 100% intensity, and your rep times are 20 to 30 seconds long for each individual rep. Studies actually show that anything past 10 seconds for a repetition does start going into the endurance phase, and the hypertrophy and strength are diminishing, which is great. I mean, if you want to have endurance train and you want to hold the dumbbells up for 30, 40 seconds and, or do it just kind of super, super slow like this and then go super, super slow down, realize you're getting into the endurance factor of that muscle. But yeah, and if you're not training as hard, you have perfect recovery, you're going to be leaning closer to that 30 range of 30 sets per muscle group. So a lot of things come into play with this when we talk about, what is better, what's most important for muscle growth and strength. The Yates Menser 1 set per body part, which it's not 1 set per body part. In honesty, if you've ever ridden or read the books by Menser and Yates and seen their routines, they do like 3 sets. So again, even they are advocates of multiple sets per body part. But today, shit influencers and fitness, they just see the one working set and then they take that and then they package it into their own little routine that is quick, fast, and easy. And then they peddle that to the unknowing people out there who see them and say, well, look at him. He's in good shape. He must know what he's talking about. I'm going to buy his program. And you will get some results, but it won't be the most efficient and the most effective when it comes to strength or hypertrophy. So anyway, yeah, it ends up that the rep ranges, again, the 6 to 12 rep ranges of doing 4 sets per body part, I've been touting that for quite some time. It's, over a decade plus, almost 2 decades, because I remember doing it when I was in the military. And it ends up, that will get you in that hypertrophy range. But with the newest studies, over 200 studies, what we end up seeing is that, actually it's 222 studies that have been analyzed, show that the rep range can be 5 to 30 repetitions will still elicit strength and hypertrophy gains. So Yeah, there's that, especially for the hypertrophy gains. So, and again, this kind of ruins the mantra or the response by the Yates-Menser advocates of the twisted one set per body part and not the actual, 2 or 3 that Menser and Yates actually did in their programs. It ruins their marketing hype. And that's what it comes down to. And then they get mad because you're giving free information that is widely accessible to the entire world, that has been tested on thousands and thousands of people, tens of thousands of people by multiple researchers, meta-analysis, which is the highest form of evidence and proof that we have. And the more studies that we have in this, the more proof we have that multiple sets is better than one for strength and or hypertrophy. And these people don't like it because it ruins their shtick. It ruins the hype of them selling their quick, fast, and easy routines to unknowing seniors. Now, is everybody going to look like, like the guy that we see here? Or is every senior going to look like this guy all bucked up? Absolutely not. But with seniors, we're behind the power curve. And if studies show that multiple sets will get you better strength and more hypertrophy from doing 2 or 3 sets, 40, 46%, 48% more better results than doing one set. My question is, if you're trying to combat against sarcopenia, muscle wasting disease, which about 30% of the population is not 30%, but people that will lose 30% of their muscle mass between the ages of 65 and 85, do you think, would you want to gain muscle slower or faster, 46% or 48% or 40% faster? I'll choose the latter just by adding, having 2 or 3 sets versus 1. And if we talk about rep ranges, especially as seniors, we can see that we don't have to go 100% hard and do 5 repetitions or 6 or 8 or 10 and then just call it quits. What we can end up doing is using higher repetitions with lower weights, and we can still elicit a strength and definitely a hypertrophy response. That has tested to show that, low weights can work, because once you tire out the smaller muscle fibers, then the larger muscle fibers have to jump in to take over. And again, that neuromuscular fatigue that we're talking about. So Menno Henselmans has some awesome, incredible stuff. And he's actually one of the guys that actually got me started on reading studies. And studies are dry. They're dry, they're scientific, they're hard to understand. When I read my first study, I'm just like, I had to pull out a dictionary. I actually had a dictionary back then. Pulling out a dictionary, looking up words and the whole 9 yards to try to grasp what was being said. Just in regards to the protocols, the training, the control groups, the measurements, the data that they gleaned from all that and how they came to the conclusions that they did based on the data, not because of some preconceived conformational bias. It took a long time. But once you know how to read the study and you can pick out the little pieces of gold and you can bring that into your routine, you can start reaping the benefits that the one set wonder yahoos will never see. They are limited on how much they can do. So with all things being equal, intensity is not the only key there is in regards to strength gains or hypertrophy. And this article by Menno Henselmans is awesome and incredible. And especially when you start looking at the studies, I wish he listed all the studies down here and the references and stuff like that. But, you can contact him. And I've read a number of the studies that are referenced. So, it's not hard. It just depends on how important it is to you. And unfortunately, there's a lot of shit influencers in the fitness world that are selling programs that are based on hype, that are based on because I said it works, because Mike Menser and Dorian Yates said it works. But if that was the case, if one set did indeed, per body part, provide better hypertrophy and strength gains, we would see Olympians training that way. We would see professional athletes. We would see professional and amateur power lifters, strength, competitions and things like that. You would see that would become widely evident. And those people train at such high intensity levels, it is off the chain. So when I see the shit influencer that says, oh, you're just not training with enough intensity, these people are using that as the scapegoat. They're using that as the silver bullet, but there's no silver in the bullet. The silver and the gold are in these studies and meta-analysis. So yeah, and unfortunately, the people that pay for this are the everyday people that are just getting into health and fitness, that don't know about health and fitness, that don't know anything about these studies. They just see some old guy or some young guy that is spouting this hype of 1 set per body part 2 times a week, 20, 30 minutes, and that's gold and that's all you'll ever need. They're not telling you the truth. They're telling you what they want you to hear so that you'll buy their program. They're not going to tell you all of the information so that you can make an informed decision, because if you looked at all the information, you would not buy their program. Again, it's simple. If you're going to take a test in school, and this test had a direct impact on how long that you live, wouldn't you want to score the highest possible? Or would you want to score 60%, or would you want to score 100% if the higher percentage led you to live longer and healthier? That's a crazy question to ask. I mean, who would not want to have the best life that they can and get 100% and live longer? Well, that's what they're doing. They're banking that you will go for the quick, easy, shortcut route with minimal time in the gym, because nobody wants to spend a lot of time in the gym because, that is so terribly horrible. Lord forbid I spend an hour and a half in the gym. If it's about your health and longevity and enjoying your golden years a hell of a lot longer in better condition than everybody else, you're going to have to put some time and energy into it. That's all there is to it. You can't cheat in that aspect. And the health benefits from strength training and the hypertrophy gains that you get as a senior are great. And then a lot of these shitfluencers in the fitness world will not talk about cardio. They won't tell you that you need to do 75 minutes to 150 minutes of elevated cardio to reap the benefits of the heart health that it gives, which can reduce cardiac events by 50%. There's some shitfluencers that they don't do any cardio. They just say, if you train with intensity and just do a 30-second long repetition, it's super slow at sloth speed, that'll give you all the cardio that you need. No, that is not how that works. Elevated heart rate over an extended period of time, they can't even follow the definition of what cardio is, which is more than 20, 30 minutes. Elevated. Yeah, they just don't get it. But they're selling hype, and that's why they poo on anything, including the 222 plus studies and all the meta-analysis, because it hurts their pocketbook. Because cheap and easy sells. It's a fact of life, and everybody wants to lessen the learning curve. They don't want to put up as much time as energy as before. Well, we can do that by taking advantage of these studies and using what works. Because if I'm just lifting weights and I'm just kind of doing this, and it's like that's all I'm doing, I'm only going to get so much return in hypertrophy and strength. But take, for example, when it comes to tempo, if I do like a 1 second up and then I squeeze that bicep as hard as I can for 1 to 2 seconds, and then I do a slow 4 to 6 second negative, that's going to put a lot of tension on that muscle. You're putting focused tension and contraction on that muscle group, recruiting more muscle fibers. And there are studies that have showed that long length partials and the stretching out of that muscle and doing slow negatives brings about more hypertrophy. But once you get over that 10-second mark of doing a repetition, it starts going into endurance, and you're losing strength and hypertrophy for the duration of that repetition. So again, volume comes into play. You can use lighter weights. As a matter of fact, in light of this information, which I found a little while ago, I did a deload week, which I ended up taking a week off. Well, actually, it was about 7, 8, 9. It was like 9 days off. And I'm changing my routine. And I'm doing 20 repetitions in my set. So if I do like 5 sets for, biceps and triceps, those sets we're going to be doing 20 reps. And it's going to be a lighter weight, but it's going to be at the point of where I'm working towards muscular fatigue with that lighter weight. And again, it's very interesting because volume does come into play. And I made sure that in regards to volume, like previously when I would do my arms, like the last time that I did my regular routine, I did a volume of about 17,000 pounds for biceps and triceps using, higher weights with lower repetitions. What I ended up doing with what I'm doing now is I'm still have the same number of sets, but I'm doing more reps for that exercise with lower weights, but the volume has increased to 18, 19, and 20,000 pounds for the overall workout. I'm still tweaking it out because volume is a big variable when it comes into strength and hypertrophy. Now, I will say that at this time, I'm currently going for hypertrophy versus strength. And when I get to a level of where I'm kind of plateauing, I'll deload and then I'll go into strength training. So that means I'll drop down into the lower rep ranges with higher intensities. Of course, between that probably 80 and 90%, which I got to be careful because there's more instances of injuries when you start training at those higher levels. And as a senior, I'm 57, going to be 58 this year. I need to keep that in mind. And I need, my joints and my shoulders and, different parts of my body aren't working as well as they used to. There's the number of injuries that have occurred and gathered up while I was in the military. Some of them are pretty bad. By the way, I am in chronic pain pretty much every day. So because of these injuries, and, you just work with what you have. But I can still work on strength and getting those gains. And then once I increase in those strength gains, I drop back down. I do a deload, and then I'll go back to hypertrophy. And I find that so far in the last 10 or so years that I'm able to increase my hypertrophy gains. And of course, using tempo and, scheduled eating and, carb loading and so on and so forth. Of course, you also have to have enough protein, which the average American doesn't eat enough anyway. So that's what we got going on. So for all the people that are like screaming Yates and Menser and they're, you're wrong. And you absolutely, when I ask you for proof and you have none, here's 222 more instances of studies and meta-analysis showing, again, the latest of being 2023. Yeah, it hasn't been disproven, and 1 set per body part, regardless of the intensity, is not king. And it never was, and I don't know why people, well, I do know why, because they're trying to sell hype, and that's it. So with that being said, if you learned anything, and again, Menno Henselmans is an awesome resource, along with the studies of Brian Schoenfeld, Ray Adeli, and some others that you can find their published studies. It will revolutionize how you work out. And if you're looking for hypertrophy, if you're looking for strength. Now, with that being said, here is the one disclaimer, which I think 1 or 2 sets per body part would be sufficient. It's definitely not for strength or hypertrophy gains, but if you attain a level of a physique and you're happy with where you're at, you could probably do 3 workouts per week, do full body workouts, and do 1 to 2 sets per body part. I would say 2 sets, honestly, because there's so many different, your chest is broken up into 3 different areas of your chest, your upper, your mid, and your lower. But generally, I would say about 2 sets per body part, and then you could maintain the physique that you have. Granted, you have good nutrition, good recovery, so on and so forth, receptors and lack of injuries, genetics comes into play and so on and so forth, metabolism. Generally, you could keep that physique by doing a full body program at least 3 times a week. And the reason I say 3 times a week is because medical professionals have shown that if you exercise at least 3 to 5 times a week, you're going to get benefits that will lengthen your life and minimize the amount of disease that will end your life. So I'm going to go with what the scientists and the doctors and the people with PhDs have come to the conclusion, instead of just 2 guys who are hyped up on juice and used traditional methods for over a decade plus and then came up with a one-set system that was never tested. And they have refused for their systems to be tested with a control group. Mike Mentzer died at 49 from heart complications. So what are the majority of bodybuilders that die from heart complications? There's a ton. There's a huge percentage. Enlarged organs, heart, cardiac events, so on and so forth. And he passed away. But then he also did barbiturates and a lot of steroids. So for the average everyday person, the dad with the dad bod who's got a couple of kids, a dog and a wife, and he wants to get rid of the pot belly and he wants to get in shape, not rippling abs and, where you can see the veins popping out everywhere. He wants to lose 10 or 15 pounds and get into decent shape so that he can reap the benefits of exercise and cardio so that he can live longer and walk his daughter down the aisle when she gets married or whatever it is, enjoys retirement. You're looking at multiple sets per body part, and you're anywhere from 10 to 30 sets per body part. I would probably say if you're starting out, I would start with 10. If you're brand new to health and fitness, maybe even 5, just to ease in with lighter weights and higher repetitions so that you can get the correct form. And then later I would push for 15 or 20. And then you could probably do that and you'd be gold along with your cardio. But if you're somebody like me that wants to hit certain goals in regards to hypertrophy, or you switch and you want certain goals for strength, or maybe you're into powerlifting, you want to get into that, set those goals and go for them. Use the things that science has shown that work. That's all I'm saying. That will get you closer to your goals than relying on the bro myths and this, misinformation and hype. But Mike Mentzer wrote a book. So he refused to have his system tested with a control group. Flat out refused. So what does that tell you? He can write all the cool things in his book, but there are no numerous studies or meta-analysis that prove his system even works. He still does 3 sets per body part, but, I'm talking about the shitfluencers that say 1 exercise per body part. It makes absolutely no sense. So in the grand scheme of things, you have multiple sets, and then you have Dorian Yates and Mike Mentzer, which actually promote, doing 2 or 3 sets per body part. And then you have the shit influencers down here at the very bottom with politicians and pedos and things like that are saying 1 set per body part. That's what pisses me off, because they're banking on you not checking out the information and making an informed decision. They don't want you to hear what I have to say or what Menno Henselmans says or Dr. Mike Israetel or Brian Schoenfeld or any of these people, because that would take money out of their pocket. So that's why they always, talk shit. And it is what it is. And I have found out that some people do multiple sets and high repetitions and sell a 1-set program. So they look big, all big and beefy. And then they all claim it's on a 1-set program because quick, easy, and fast sells. How dishonest is that? I couldn't live with myself to do something like that. But there's people that do it. There's people on steroids who say that, no, I don't do steroids, and you buy my program, you can, look at me, the result of me. I couldn't live like that. I did my natural recomp sans PED, and I got to a time a number of years later that I had low T, and boom, I went on TRT. So what's the big deal? But the key element that we see is that I glean all the information from these proven studies and meta-analysis. So I've had a number of people that will say, you know what, you're on TRT, so that doesn't count. Well, you're promoting Mike Mentzer and Dorian Yates, which is, I'm doing like 100 a week on testosterone, which is kind of a low dose. They were doing like 300, 400, and 500 a week, sometimes even more. And then on top of that, they did D-ball and they did Anabar and they did multiple serious gear juicing test steroids. And you're saying that that's going to work, their program's going to work for you? Again, let's compare apples to apples. And the science, what's interesting, what I really, really love, and this is the last thing I'm going to say, what I really love about these studies and meta-analysis is studies deal with men, deals with women, young, old, trained, untrained, people in the military, people in law enforcement. I've seen some studies that deal with those type of people. But the one thing that I do like is that none of these people were on steroids or enhanced supplementation, which would skew the results of the study. So these scientists understand and that it's very important that you stay within the bounds of being natural. And so this shows what is possible with being natural. And it's great. It is more than I think people realize. And people limit themselves because they don't base their decisions on facts, and facts matter. So, okay, so that's going to be it. I got to get some lunch. And one set per body part, ship influencers, you're at the very bottom. Well, not the very bottom. Below that are pedos. So, yeah, there's that. Peace.